This conversation is being had in a financial silo.
If you can't afford to buy a car cash, don't take a loan. But if you can afford to pay cash, then you can consider taking a loan.
Yeah. Taking a car loan is a bad financial decision.
99% of the time.
99% of the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
When people are trying to maybe buy their first car, maybe buy a car, it's usually more of an emotional decision than a logical decision. People who say that maybe when I'm buying a property, I'm saving myself rent.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's usually a misconception, maybe a false belief. The most recommended budgeting advice is using the 50-30-20 rule. I'm sure you've heard about that rule.
I have had many rules.
Your personal finance should be very unique to you. You should be having some set of rules that only you think they make sense. Me, I've always said that your budget should always reflect the things that mean the most to you. You should spend extravagantly on things that you love and cut costs mercilessly on things that you don't.
Do you think kids are a good financial decision?
I don't want to answer that question. People will come for me.
This is Financially Incorrect, where we have a cheeky take on serious financial topics. We learn from people's journeys, understand, I guess they say learning from other people's mistakes is what is wisdom, as opposed to making the mistakes yourself. No one teaches us about money as we're growing up, so we just really trying to understand how people have gone about it. Is it as theoretical as the experts say? And today we have a different kind of episode. Today we actually have a financial expert, Kahome, who's here with me and who is going to break down. I hope you guys will enjoy this episode. It's, the way we've thought about it, I think would be really fascinating, but we're going to break down different elements of finance that we think are important as an adult in Kenya or in Africa, and we're going to look at the possible solutions of going around them. For example, buying a car. How should you go about buying a car? Taking a loan vis-a-vis paying for it cash. Renting a house or buying a house. If you're buying a house, what are you foregoing by spending that 15 to 20 million on buying the house? Is it true that if you don't buy a house, you truly have nowhere to live? And anyway, we're going to go down that whole path. And as usual, this podcast is proudly sponsored by FX Pesa, who are making trading easy. So for all of this disposable income that you have, if you're trying to generate extra revenue or trying to learn about trading and how you can go about it, FX Pesa is a perfect partner for you. You can learn from experts like Rufus Kamau, who's on Twitter, who's always talking about different financial things in the spaces. So he would personally teach you so you can be able to learn how to trade better and make money off of trading. Remember, FX Pesa is your perfect partner, and it's through them that we are able to have these fantastic conversations. So, welcome back. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. When you were last here, did we have this light?
No, it wasn't on.
It wasn't on.
Yeah.
Or is it the one that's down there? Maybe it's that old one.
Yeah, I think it is the old
it's
one.
the older one. Yeah. Anyway, so we have a new light now. So started Financially Incorrect. The other one was on air, stroke on air, depending on who was reading it.
Yeah.
So we are improving things slowly. We have new graphics as well. The others come on the screen. Anyway, but we're moving up. So before I guess we get into the actual conversation for today, maybe you could give us a bit of a background into how you got into the financial space and what your one key principle for a healthy financial lifestyle is.
Okay, so myself, I got into maybe for those who don't know me, I'm Gichuki Kahome, so I'm a financial educator. So I got into the financial space maybe as a good accident, or maybe just following my passions and the things that I love in life. So I was just following my curiosity, reading about books of personal finance and investing. So I think the first book that I ever read on investing was Poor Charlie's Almanac. So it's the biography of Charlie Munger, who is the investing partner of Warren Buffett. So from that time, then I went to Warren Buffett shareholder letters. Then I've been building on top of that. So I was reading more on the Western world. So I looked at how I can now mirror those principles that I was learning in the Western world now to a Kenyan space. So I started sharing my thoughts on Twitter and on my blog. That's how I accidentally found myself in finance. Yeah.
Okay. What's your one key principle for a healthy financial lifestyle?
So for a healthy financial style, I can say it's two ways. So on a Kenyan space, I will say that maybe first of all, most people have an income problem. So if you look at our poverty levels and you compare our GDP with other developed countries, so most of us are disadvantaged just by being born in Kenya. You're maybe 2 steps behind of maybe the global average. So the first thing work on your income or your earning potential. Then after that, get some financial literacy, or maybe get someone who helps you with their finances. Because out here, people are making a lot of bad financial decisions. Some loans or maybe some long-term debt like mortgages are can have you stuck in life for quite a lot of years, because if you take a mortgage 20, 30 years and then it ends up being a bad financial decision, it can really set you back for life for quite a lot of years. So my say will be, maybe personal finance is very personal. So how you see other people approaching their finances shouldn't ideally be how you approach your finances, because you all have different circumstances, different backgrounds. So you should always try to adjust to your level of to your personal life. I'd say. Yeah.
Okay. Let's get into our first scenario, right? Let's talk about car ownership.
Okay.
So first of all, if I'm looking to buy a car, do you advocate for, and I have the cash, let's say the car's cost is 1.5 million and I have cash, do you advocate for me to go and buy the car cash, or should I go and talk to the car dealer and get on the payment plans?
Okay, interesting. So when it comes to car ownership, there are a couple of ways to look at these. So for the average person who doesn't have the 1.5 million cash upfront, so he's not debating whether to buy cash or to maybe take a loan. So for him, he doesn't have the option of taking the loan. So for the average person who doesn't have the option of buying the car cash, 99% of the times taking the car loan will end up being a bad financial decision.
Taking a car loan is a bad financial decision.
99% of the times.
99% of the time.
Yeah,
okay.
because of just things that you can all agree on. So number one, a car is a depreciating asset. Number two, there's this guy called Kiyosaki. Okay, people have different views about what he taught. Some people call him a fraud, but because he redefined the word asset and liability, whereby he said that maybe a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket, but maybe just to borrow that only, and not whether I recommend his books and his other ideas, but just that only. So a car will be taking money from your pocket at the end of every month. So if you take a car loan, one, you have the monthly repayments. Two, you have maybe your fueling, your service and maintenance, and all these other costs that come with car ownership. So that's why I say that maybe for 99% of the time, so maybe 99% of the people, taking a car loan will be a bad financial decision, because now you are paying a mortgage at maybe 17, depending with your bank or maybe whoever is giving you the car loan, maybe at least from maybe 12 to maybe until up to highs of 20%, maybe for the modest financial institutions. Then if you are going with Shylocks or maybe some other informal arrangements, you may find yourself paying up to maybe 67, 50 something percent per annum on your car loan. So that can be quite high. So the fact that you are paying more and that you are overstretching your budget because you have extra expenses combined with the monthly repayments and that the car is a depreciating asset, those and other factors, but those being the main factors, makes it a bad decision for 99% of the people to take a car loan.
Okay.
However, there are a few special cases. So there are people who have access to cheaper car loans. Maybe I've seen this with guys who work in the banking sector or with financial institutions, even guys who work for certain arms of the government or maybe some other special industries. So there are people who their employers have special arrangements as part of their compensation package.
Yes.
Whereby maybe they can get I've seen guys get car loans at 0 interest, others at 3%, others at 5%, others at 8%. So those can be termed maybe as good debt, because one, the repayment rates are quite low, because rather than saving up money to buy that car and taking this loan, if you're taking a loan at 8%, then you can be investing your savings at, let's say, 11%, 12%. You have seen bonds fetching 18% this year, so you'll be winning because you'll be making more money than you're repaying your loan. So that can make sense. Yeah, but since these are very special cases, that's why I say 99% of the times it will be a bad decision.
So if the repayment terms are below 10% or below a certain, it needs to be below the amount. It needs to be below the percentage that your money would potentially be making if you had invested it elsewhere.
Yeah. Then that will be a good. It can be termed as a good debt.
Right.
Yeah. So just the basic guidelines. For me, I always like to refer the benchmark asset class in Kenya as being the long-term treasury bonds, because that's what the average Kenyan investor is investing in, because our equities market hasn't been doing quite well. So yes, it's one of the highest returning assets currently, and maybe a lot of times, but that's the asset class that I like referring to, because maybe that's the easiest investment that most people can access or maybe can invest in.
Okay.
So always try to look at. And also it's almost guaranteed, because the return is fixed, not like maybe the stock market where it can vary between the loan repayment period. So Those two decisions.
So it means even then that, so even if I have if I take this but wait, so this means that this would be in a situation where I have the 1.5 million.
The situations you have talked about were when you don't have the 1.5 million.
Yes.
Now I was just about to branch not if you have the cash and the loan.
Okay,
now.
so if I don't have the 1.5 million and I take the loan from my employer, which is at 8%, how is it still a good financial decision? Because I'm not investing my money in anywhere else.
Okay, it's a good. I'm saying it can be a good financial decision because of what you call the opportunity cost.
Yes.
Because if you are saving your money to buy that car, if you are saving your money month on month or year on year, if it will take you maybe a year, 2 years, or maybe 5 years to save up for that car, depending on your level of income, your money will be growing at, let's say, the return rate on investment. Like on average, like I've said, if let's say it's a long-term bond, maybe it's fetching 14%, your money will be growing at 14% per annum.
Yes.
But your loan is only taking away 8% per annum or maybe 5% per annum. So you have made a difference of maybe the difference now between the rate of investment and now the return on investment and now your car loan repayment rate. You have made some money on top. So the opportunity cost of, so it becomes a better decision for you maybe to go for to invest your money, then come up with a way to repay the loan because you are making more money than you are losing. So the maths adds up.
Okay. Yeah. So even then in that instance, you're still saying that make the 14% elsewhere.
Yeah.
Then
repay the
8% elsewhere, and that's how it's whatever.
Yeah.
But in this instance, we're discussing about someone who doesn't have. So you still need to find money to.
Yeah, but you'll be saving month on month. So here we are making a difference. So there's between saving the money, saving for the car, and borrowing the money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because if you decide to start saving today, maybe it will take you 1 year or 2 years. Like I've mentioned, your money will be growing at 14%. Then your car loan is maybe you are repaying at maybe 6 or 8%. Okay, this is a very unique case and special case. Most Kenyans don't have access to this. So that's why I say 99% for 99% of the people, it will be a bad decision.
Okay, if you don't have them.
Yeah, but if you have those special arrangements, you can take advantage of them because they 100% make a lot of sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about that scenario? If you have the money.
So if you have the money now, it becomes a different scenario because you all know that cash is king. So you can do a lot of things with the money that you have. So if you're a business owner, you can use your money to maybe restock your business, maybe expand your business, rather than now, the person with the money, like I've said, cash is king. So if you're a business owner, for example, maybe you're self-employed or whatever you're trying to do, maybe you're a farmer, you can use the money to expand your business or maybe to cater for the working capital, maybe the short-term working capital of your business. So for you, the money can be much worthy for you. Maybe it may mean a lot for you to have the cash than to buy the car in cash. So depending now with the rates and also the return on investment on your business and maybe your investment, so now you can do the maths now. Yeah.
So again, it boils back down to is the cash that you have.
Yeah.
That can generate more money in a different
asset class.
Yeah, in a different.
Yeah, because guys who are in business, they make a better return on investment than investing in financial assets, because when investing in financial markets, maybe the average return you can get on the shilling is around 12%. But maybe there's someone with a very unique business who is making maybe 20-25% return on investment on whatever business he's in. So for him, even taking maybe a car loan at 18% can still make sense for them. And even it can even make more sense for them if they are in dire need for cash flow. Because if maybe you want to buy a car for 5 million and you need that 5 million as working capital maybe for the next 3 months for your business, so having that capital ready for you can set you up for to run your business. Then you can just take a car loan and use maybe the profits from your business from just have a way to repay your car loan.
Okay. So even if you have the cash, best financial decision still is looking at investing that cash in a different space, taking a car loan, and still trying to ensure that the rate that you're paying back the car loan is lower than than the return that you're making from the money you're investing.
Yeah, so actually there's usually a funny quote. I'm not sure how I got this, or maybe I made it up, but there's usually this quote that says that, okay, if you can't afford to buy a car cash, don't take a loan. But if you can afford to pay cash, then you can consider taking a loan. Yeah, so there's usually that rule of thumb, because now you have options for you.
But it's not just taking a loan. You have to take a loan and do something with that money. Like that money needs to be invested elsewhere to be generating return. Right?
Yeah, or maybe you can definitely get a better use of your money.
Yeah. Okay. All right, interesting. Okay, what about upgrading, right? If I want to upgrade, if I want to upgrade my car, and we have trade-in options now. So let's say yes, I've bought my car. I have the 1.5 million, like we said. So I have gone and I have invested it in, I don't know, my business. I've taken the loan. I've paid it back. My business has made more money than I needed to pay back. So I've technically made money, right? During that season. And now it's been a couple of years. I now want to upgrade my car. So I want to, buy a car that's worth what, 5 million, 6 million. What's the financial, financially correct way of going about buying this car? Is it the same? Does the same principle apply in this instance?
Yeah, I think the same principles apply.
Yeah.
All across, they cut across. Yeah, the same.
So it's
principles
saving up to have the cash.
Yeah, it's all about looking at those scenarios that you have. What options can you make? What's your rate on return if you're investing that money? What's the cost of the loan? What if you're a business person? What other business ventures, or maybe what's the rate that you can make from your business? Then the total cost of this car loan, and yeah, you can always do those maths and see how things weigh out.
So to summarize it with your quote is, if you don't have the cash, don't buy the car. But if you have the cash, consider taking a loan.
Okay, there are a few rules of thumb that you can use whenever you're talking about car loans.
Yeah.
So number one, 99% of the people is going to be a bad financial decision. But then remember again, a car, when people are trying to maybe buy their first car, maybe buy a car, it's usually more of an emotional decision than a logical decision, maybe a numbers game, because everyone knows. I think everyone who is maybe every adult, most people will know that buying a car loan will be a bad financial decision. But maybe you still want it because maybe it brings the convenience. Maybe saving up for one will take a lot of time. Maybe it will give you some status that you're looking for and all that. So the second rule of thumb, if you must take a car loan and you are knowing it's a bad financial decision, so your budget must accommodate the other expenses. So number one, you have the monthly repayments, you have the fueling, the servicing, all that. So if your budget can accommodate that, then maybe you can afford a car loan, because there's you having the option of the car loan and you affording the car loan.
Yes.
So to afford the car loan, your budget must be accommodative of all those expenses. Because now for most people now, you'll find that now if they take their car loan and now all those expenses add up, they take a big chunk of their budgets, and now you have very little wiggle room with your income. So you're overstretched, you are stressed at night, you are out here looking for ways you can make money, trying to gamble your little savings on the weekend, so that you can just create some breathing room for yourself.
Right.
And then again, a car loan, there are people who try to argue that maybe a car loan is not a long-term debt. I think the average maybe repayment period is between maybe 1 year to around, I think 4 or 5 years, but on average between 2 to 3 years repayment period. So compare that with a mortgage, which is a long-term, 20, 30 year debt.
Engagement, yeah.
Yeah. Now for a car, which is basically between maybe 1 to let's say 2 to 3 years on average. So you will maybe easily get over it, and you can easily get over it. But now when it comes maybe a longer term debt like a mortgage, now that will be stuck here for years, for decades actually.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Interesting. I guess, let me see. Do I have another question on cars? Let me get into home ownership, right? Renting versus buying a house. First of all, what are your general principles on renting and buy? And again, guys, I guess for the people who are watching or paying attention to the podcast, we're trying to create, this conversation is being had in a financial silo. So it's purely about, it's a numbers game. Yes, you can take into account the emotional elements, but we're trying to look at just, numbers wise, financially, what's the best decision to make. So what's your principle around houses in terms of renting or buying?
Yeah, so maybe just like you highlighted, in finances, it's all about the emotions more, maybe 80% and 20% numbers, because most people make decisions because they're looking at what other people in the environment are doing. So most financial decisions are not made on the spreadsheet. They are made on dinner tables, when families are going outside, when guys are just having a random walk with friends. So most financial decisions are not a numbers decision. They are actually psychological, maybe emotional decisions. So that's why you'll find people, maybe the uptake of car loans is still high, even though the numbers don't make sense for most people. But yeah, most financial decisions are not a numbers game. It's an emotional thing. So now to home ownership, So the first thing, like I've told you, it's not a numbers game. So there's 20% numbers, 80% it's all the emotions and how you think about money. So I would like to start by this and say that most people in Kenya or even globally, they have a bad name towards renting. Yeah, guys always bad talk renting. So maybe I've always said this over and over again. If you start being well off, your friends will start asking you, utalipa rent hadi lini, or when will you stop paying rent? You are losing money to your landlord. Maybe you are making your landlord rich. But actually, if you look at the numbers, you're actually making him poor. Because if you look at rental yields in Kenya, they're around maybe 6 to 8% on average, and then also the average appreciation of a property in Kenya is around maybe between 1 to 4%, depending on locations as well. So location is a very big factor. So I've had cases whereby I'm discussing options or maybe investment options with people and ask them, okay, in the house you live, how much are you paying for rent? So they tell me a certain number. And what's the market value of that house? Then they realize that the rental yield of their landlord, it's at 4%. Then I ask the person, do you want to be the landlord, or maybe do you want to invest in the investment options whereby you're earning maybe 16-18% like we have seen this year? So one, I will say that people over...
That's not that you've just given us. Can we put, even if it's hypothetical, can we put numbers to it? Like, let's pick an apartment complex in, I don't know, Kileleshwa. These ones that are going for 21 million shillings, right? So the rent for that would be what, 100 and...
Okay, so the rental yield will come to... So the rental yield, it's around 10%. We can use... Okay, that's on a high end, 10%, but it's usually between 6 to 8% net. So rental is just your monthly rent multiplied by 12, then divide by the market value of your property. That's what we call the rental yield. So if you are taking a house of 20 million, you need to get 10% of that, which is, I believe, 2 million.
Yes.
And then divide that by 12.
2 million divided by 12, 166,000.
166,000. Yeah. So that's maybe the gross. So now the net, now you have to deduct, maybe you have to account for a lot of things. You have to account for if maybe we have guys who have rentals, maybe you have guys who have maybe other properties. So depending with the number of units that you're talking about, you have to account for occupancy levels, because, and actually, which are quite lower in Kenya depending on the location, because I was reading the study by Knight Frank, which does evaluations of different properties in Kenya and East Africa, and for commercial spaces the occupancy levels at around 70-75%. So now for residential units, depending on location, the average might be actually lower than that. So one, you have to account for the occupancy levels, because if it's not 100%, then you'll have some units that are unoccupied. Then number two, you have to account for taxes. Rental income is taxed at 7.5%. Then if you're buying a property off plan, or maybe you are buying a property in the market, there is the capital gains tax. If you're selling, that is, there's a capital gains tax. Then there are some other costs that are also involved in the initial costs that are involved if you're buying a property for the first time. Yeah, so you have to account for those differences as well.
Right.
Then now the average rental yield will come to around 6 to 8% for most properties. But yeah, depending on location and how, maybe there are certain real estate developers that have very good units and have a brand for themselves that have maybe higher rental yields. Maybe some properties that maybe have very distinguishable characteristics, or maybe that meet a certain clientele demand. So maybe they may have a higher rental yield than maybe other properties.
Okay. So, I mean, so if you're saying, if I'm hearing correctly, you're saying that a landlord will be making between 4 to 8%.
Okay, so depending with, so here, location is a key factor, but like I've told you, the average is between 6 to 8%. So there are guys doing poorer than that.
Yes,
and there are guys who doing maybe slightly better than that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that against, so for example, like a basic money market fund would be like what, 10%?
Yeah. Obviously, 11%. A basic investment, maybe like a money market fund, even some bank savings account will
be higher than
than that. Yeah.
The rental yield.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay. So then
maybe I deviated a bit. So we were talking about home ownership and renting. So just trying to say that maybe people over glorify, maybe people glorify home ownership so much, and they try and trash talk renting. So just if we remove the numbers thing, home ownership, now this one is usually a debate for guys in the middle income, because guys maybe who are in the lower income can't maybe afford housing. Housing is not an option for them because maybe it's too expensive for them. They can't think about it. Then guys who are guys who are super wealthy, who are in the first class, maybe who are in the upper classes, can afford it cash. So for them, it's not a discussion for them. So this discussion is people who are mainly for guys who are in the upper middle, maybe in the middle class, maybe low middle, or maybe upper middle class, because these are the guys now who have the option either to take mortgages or maybe to rent or to do that. But if you are in those top classes, maybe buying a house for you, maybe owning a house, it's just like a basic need, or maybe something that you can easily manage to do. So now here, like I was saying, there are two things that you have to look at when you're comparing between home ownership and renting that are not even numbers game. So the first thing is flexibility, and also now security, because there are people who say that maybe when I have a home, or maybe when I have a place to live, and my kids, my family, when we have a home, we have that sense of security, or maybe we have that feeling of security that even if things went south, at least I have a home.
Yes.
Yeah. Food and these other expenses we can gamble with, and we can always find our way through. But I have a home. Nobody can chase me away from this place. I have a home. I have that feeling of security. So there are people who prefer home ownership because of that feeling of security. Then number two, now on the other side of renting, there are people who like flexibility. So maybe there are guys who like traveling throughout the year, and also now the younger guys who are still maybe not yet starting families. So maybe they have not started, they don't have kids yet. So maybe they want to travel a lot, maybe live at this place at this moment, then maybe a few years down the line, you're maybe exploring different areas. So now renting gives you some flexibility rather than home ownership. So those two factors are maybe what narrows down key drivers of whether to choose between renting and home ownership.
Okay.
And then, like I mentioned, it's more of an income play game, because the guys who are doing pretty well, for them it's owning a house is just walking to the bank and writing some check. Yeah. And then the guys who are at the low income levels, for them it's not an option. So it's mainly an investment decision, maybe a financial decision for people in the middle income.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like, and to try and sort of weave a theme that's consistent with what you're talking about the car as well. It sounds like to some degree and at some level, some of these financial decisions are whether you can afford it or not. Not so much whether it's a good or a bad financial decision, but whether you can afford it. And why I'm saying that is because when you're talking about the car loan, you were saying, it seems like there's no instance where taking a car loan is a quote-unquote good financial decision. It might be, but you'd have to invest the money elsewhere, make sure, like you'd have to work very hard to make it a good financial decision. Whereas there's then the question of, can you afford it? It's not so much about whether it's a good or bad financial decision, but can you afford it? And even now, when you're talking about the houses, you're saying for the low income, low income people who are earning a certain level of income, it's not even a discussion because you can't afford it.
It's not.
And people at the top, it's not a discussion either because they can afford it. I can afford to spend 100 million. So it's not about whether spending the 100 million is going to be good or bad. It's I can afford it.
They can afford it.
And then the guys in the middle class, who are the ones who...
Those are the guys crunching numbers.
Trying to figure it out. So it seems like there's an element of financial lifestyle that boils down to simply, can you afford it? Do you have enough money to afford making a bad decision and living with it without it completely denting your lifestyle?
Because even if you look at how people do their net worth valuations, there are people who try and argue differently. So there are people who try to argue that maybe your home, maybe your residential home, should not be included in when you are calculating your net worth. How much are you worth? That maybe you should not include it. The guys who say that maybe your home where you live in is a dead asset. So if you look at those things, so do you have the luxury of maybe owning a dead asset, or maybe having something that maybe doesn't derive a lot of, maybe doesn't add up to a huge chunk of maybe of your net worth if you removed it?
I want to ask you a question. There's some houses of some friends of ours, we went to look at, I think sometime last year or the year before, and they were going for about 17 or 18 million, and they looked fantastic, looked amazing, looked great, proper, with good space and ensuite and all these things, and patio at the top, So it's genuinely a consideration of, should we save for something like this? So my question is, if I bought that house, or if I go and buy a house for 17 million or 20 million, whatever the price is, what am I potentially foregoing? And for this, I guess I'm asking, Because of course, when I'm buying the house, I'm buying it with the lens of it's going to give me security, all those other things. And now I'm asking, is there information you can give me about what I'm foregoing that will blow my mind and completely open me up to, you know what? I don't mind renting a house for the rest of my life if it means that with this 17 million, I could make X.
Okay, so first, just to mention, people never really break down the numbers. Maybe they don't know how to break down the numbers when it comes to maybe looking at property, maybe even investments in general. So like I mentioned, you have seen a house worth maybe 18, 20 million, or maybe whatever price that you mentioned. But then again, you have to look at the numbers now. So if you're trying to evaluate maybe home ownership, okay, now it depends whether the property it's maybe for your residential home, or I have seen guys buying off-plan properties to maybe rent and do other things. So maybe I can start with this second category where guys are trying to buy houses, maybe property off-plan, then they can rent the houses and then maybe get some rental income. So if you look at the average person who's making that decision, people don't look at the numbers. So I've had clients who are buying a lot of properties, then you ask them, okay, the market value, maybe actually what they know is that the money, maybe the buying value, or maybe what amount of money they spent to acquire that property. Maybe they bought it 2 years ago. If you ask them today what's the market value of that house, they don't know. If you ask them what's the rental yield of that property, they don't know. If you ask them what their goal was when buying this property, they'll tell you that you wanted some passive income. But then if you ask them, did you compare other options that can give you passive income? Maybe did you compare bonds, dividends, money market funds, and all these other options that can give you income, and look at how they compare maybe between rental income and all these other options? Did you do that? Then they don't have the numbers. It's always good to have the numbers. If maybe you have the market value of a property is maybe 20M, what's the expected rental income, and then the property where the location of your property, what are the maybe average occupancy rates? Do you see when you walk at night, if it's a residential property, do you see a lot of do you see some vacant units, or what's just the feeling of properties similar to yours around that location? So that's number one. You have to know that. You have to know the numbers, the rental yield, average appreciation rate, because people have this assumption that properties will appreciate over value, which is true. But then if you ask them, can you account for that appreciation? They will say that maybe in 2 years or maybe in 3 years, your property will have doubled in value. But if you look at that, that's an overestimation, because like I mentioned, on average, most properties appreciate around maybe 1 to 5%. Okay, in some cases, it can be, depending on demand and supply as well, it can be maybe higher than that, but on average, that's the average appreciation rate now, depending on the location. So you must know your numbers. So now your question was maybe what
am I
what you are
foregoing?
foregoing.
Yeah, potentially.
So this is what now to add up to the point that I mentioned, there are people who say that maybe when I'm buying a property, I'm saving myself rent.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's usually a misconception, maybe a false belief.
Yes.
Because you're not saving yourself rent, because you could have you must look at the opportunity cost. So this is the cost of foregoing the other option. So with that 20 million that you're using to spend maybe to buy your house, you can still invest. If your main worry is rent, meeting your rent expenses, you don't want to ever think about renting again. So you can always look at other investment options that you can invest your money in, and use the proceeds, or maybe the income that you are generating from that investment, to cater for your rent. Because if you look at 20M, if you can just try to do some quick maths, 20 million, if you're looking at maybe the average return of a long-term bond, which is around 14%, 20 million, that will be around, I think, 1.4. Is it 1.4?
Let me do it very quickly here. 20 million
times 0.14.
Yeah, it's 2.8.
2.8. I was doing 10 million.
2.8.
2.8 million. Yeah, now 2.8 million, divide that by 12.
Divide that by 12. 233,000.
So you can afford to live in a house
that would pay,
I can pay the rent. That you can pay the rent of to that 3,000. So maybe the house you are buying at let's say 20,000.
If Brian's eyes are opening up.
Now let's look at if you look at the house now that you are going to buy at 20 million, and let's assume the rental yield it's let's say 8%. So if you bought that house and you want to rent it out, so the rental yield will be 8%. So now you can do 8% of 20 million.
8% of 20 million.
Yeah.
Okay. 8% of 20 million. 8% of 20 million. It's first of all, it's 1.6 million, and then it's 133,000.
133. So you can see you have a difference of 100,000.
Yes, between what I would potentially make.
Between the house that you could be living in and the house that you own now. And that's what most people come to realize, because like I mentioned, whenever
Yeah.
whenever I'm talking investments about with investment opportunities with most
Yeah.
of my clients, or maybe most people in general, the
Yeah.
first asset class that usually mention is real estate and land for most people. And then I ask them, okay, I know you live somewhere. What amount are you paying in rent? So they give me a certain figure. Then, do you know the market value of the house that you live in? They tell me, okay, I know the market value of this amount. Okay, let's do the maths here. What's the rental yield? So there's a client who we found that the rental yield of the property he was in was 4%. Then I asked him, do you want to be the landlord earning 4%, or do you want to earn 16? Do you want to earn 18?
rent
To earn,
and-
do you want to maybe invest in another asset class and earn 18%? Because now 18 minus 4, that's a lot of money. You are
Yes.
making 3 times, 4 times what your landlord is making, and you want to be like him. So it doesn't make sense. So there is that. Then
Yeah.
whenever I'm talking about that, there are usually questions that guys float in. So people will say that maybe the appreciation of your house will go up if you own the house. So it's not only about the rental yield, which I agree. But then again, you have to put some numbers in there in the appreciation of that property. So like I mentioned, on average, properties appreciate around maybe 1 to 5%, but now depending on location and the forces of demand and supply. So that's number one. Then there are people who say that if, let's say, you went and started living in that house where you're paying rent of 3,000, maybe after a certain period of time, you will see maybe in 10 years or maybe in 5 years, rent will always maybe appreciate, or something of the sort. So if you want to maybe cater for your rent expense only, we have only used one asset class, which is a bond. So you can always come up with a portfolio of, let's say, a combination of let's say, let's say 80% in bonds, or maybe 20% in the stock market. Then to account for maybe the capital appreciation, maybe the hike, the interest, the rental hikes, maybe the increase in rent. There are a lot of ways you can do it. Maybe you can be saving up you can be adding some more money to your portfolio over time, just a little amount of money to your portfolio, maybe 5,000 per month, maybe just investing more to account for those rental hikes. But then again, remember, the house that we are renting out is 3,000, and the house that we are living in is 3. So you can always have that difference and say, okay, for my 20 million, I can afford to rent a house of 3,000 per month. So let me now rent maybe 100 or maybe even lower than that, and then you have a huge margin.
And you make the 130 or
Yeah,
whatever it is.
so before maybe your rent hits the 3, it will take a lot of time, I believe. It will take a lot of time.
A question. Bring this a bit closer to, I guess bring it back a bit. So if I was to say, I want us to work backwards. If I was to say, I want to pay rent of between, like you said, between 100 and 150,000, and I want my rent to be catered for the rest, and not think about it, so that I don't even get into this home ownership issue. How much money do I need to have invested? Let's use government bonds. How much money do I need to have invested in government bonds for me to not care about rent at 100,000?
Okay, so let me just clarify this. So we're just looking at one asset class.
Yes, this is just one. Right now, we're just using.
Because the reason why I use bonds, then just to clarify that, clarify this, maybe the people who maybe have a lot of questions on bonds. The other day was saying the other day guys were saying that Jimmy Wanjigi was saying that maybe the government will default and it's only a matter of time. And then I tweeted and said that there's a guy called Robert Kiyosaki who has predicted 10 of the last 2 stock market crashes, and Jimmy Wanjigi has predicted 2 of the last 0 government defaults. So yes, all these things might happen, but then again, you're only using one asset class. You can even have your own portfolio of assets. Maybe you have bonds, stocks, gold, Bitcoin, circles, money market funds, ETFs. You can have a lot of asset classes that you can always use to generate passive income for you and cater for your rental expenses, or maybe whatever other expenses that you have. So we're only using bonds because it's easier to use bonds, because bonds, the returns are predictable. And if you lock in a bond, like, let's say 14% in 10 years, you'll have the same rate of return for until that bond matures. So we're only using bond because it has very good, unique features that can help us do the maths, simplify the maths. But you can also have other asset classes in that portfolio. And then you can even build a portfolio that you can use to meet not only rental expenses, but even other expenses. So not to answer your question, how much do you need to invest to maybe basically just meet the rental expenses? So the basic return, or maybe the average return when interest rates are low, in a low interest rate environment, because currently we're in a high interest rate environment, but we have seen major central banks starting cutting rates. So it's bonds, long-term bonds, which around maybe 13 to 14%. So for safety factor, let's use even a lower rate. Let's use 12% to be safe.
That's even closer to like a money market.
Yeah, even closer to a money market fund.
So 12%.
Let's use 12%. So we want the proceeds of this bond
to pay
your rental income. So you'll just need to take 12% of a certain number is now your annual rental expense.
Which would be, let's say, annual.
So
it would
your
be-
monthly was
If it's 100, it's 1.2.
1.2, yeah.
Yes.
So 12% of a certain
12%.
number is 1.2 million. So just
Yes.
now do the reverse multiplication. So just multiply by 100 divided by 12. So just take 1.2 multiply by 100. That's yeah. Then divide by 12. 144. 144,000. Does that? Let me.
Can't be 144, can it?
144.
Yeah.
Can it be 144 really?
No, it can't.
So we are saying 12%.
It has to be- yeah,
12% of a certain number is 1.2 million.
Yeah,
It has to be higher.
Yeah, 12% is
Of a certain number is 1.2 million.
Yes.
So you're just basically now multiplying with the inverse of that. You multiply by 100 over 12.
Yeah.
It has to be higher than that.
So it is
1.2 multiply by 100.
I'm getting 10.
10 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be 10 million.
I'm getting 10
Yeah,
million.
it should be 10 million. It should be 10 million. That's okay. It should be 10 million.
Yeah, 10 million.
It should be 10 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to have 10 million for you now to get the 12%, which is 1.2M, divide now by 12 to get your 100,000 in rent. But then again, it's always good to have some room to play around with. So if you are anticipating to live in a place where you're paying rent for 100,000 per month, rent can be hiked tomorrow and you'll be kicked out. Maybe it will be, or maybe you'll be uncomfortable with that. It's always good to have some margin of safety, also now to allow for the difference over time. So 12% is a very conservative rate with bonds because 13, 14% on normal times it's easy to get. Then as well, you can maybe add, maybe use a higher number. Instead of using 100, maybe you can use 120 because maybe anticipating rent hikes in the next maybe 5-10 years, 120 or 150, then you can have a good room. You can have a good margin of safety.
Yeah. But basically, I mean, basically it looks like if it's boiling back to purely numbers, it makes financial sense to rent.
Yeah, it makes a lot of financial sense.
Yeah. If it's in a purely numbers game.
Yeah, but then remember, like I mentioned, a house is a basic need.
Yes.
Yeah, so the guys on the top there, they are not debating on whether to own a house or not. For them, it's just automatic.
Yeah. Okay. So it's but again, it goes back to the point of, but even if you're renting, it's about finding the best financial ways to have your rent paid. So whether it's putting the money that you would be paying, buying a house for, putting it in an investment and using those returns to pay your rent. So again, it's not just about sitting on your loins and be like, yeah, renting is the option to go.
Yeah, but maybe to summarize it and see this. Okay, I'm not recommending renting or maybe buying home ownership. Whenever I'm having these conversations, I'm not even recommending any type of way, maybe recommending renting or home ownership, just to open people's minds that whenever you're making a certain financial decision, you can think about it this way and you can think about it this way. So now it's you now to make the
decision for yourself.
But now don't just be the average Kenyan who is saying that maybe renting is bad.
Okay.
You are making your landlord rich, but then you have done the maths, you're making him poor actually. You can even make yourself rich
You can be
at
richer
his expense.
than
Your
your
landlord
landlord.
is expense because he's providing providing you with a basic need of housing at a lower rate because for himself, maybe he doesn't know the numbers, maybe he's diversified, he has other investments, so maybe his property is just a diversification. So you are paying less for that housing need that you are accruing from
Okay.
him. Yeah.
I think we can move on to the next segment, which essentially is no. The thing I wanted to push back on was, what about the where's the space for collateral? Because I guess a lot of people also say, once you have the a physical asset, you can take a loan against it, or you can take a facility against it. Where's the room for that in I guess with the way that you see things?
Okay, so now those are now depending with your personal maybe personal finance choices and how you are looking at things. So maybe owning an asset gives you maybe room for acquiring a loan. So that's maybe an advantage that maybe we haven't talked about in real estate. But as well, even your bonds, you can actually, or maybe your portfolio, whatever shares that you have, maybe other assets that you have, you can still use them as collateral for a loan. Yeah, so now it's just evaluating the options that you have, because there are people who may think that maybe having an item, maybe a physical asset for collateral is important. And for others, maybe they don't need it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's look at what the ideal Kenyan Actually, before we get there, I want us to sort of do this segment of what I had termed "How should I live?" Right, and so here basically we're going to look at different levels of income that people are earning in our country, and your view on how they should look at their finances. And here we're taking into account rent, stroke bills, investing, stroke saving, the amount of money they're spending on entertainment, whether they have kids or not. And yeah, from a purely numbers perspective, what should it look like? So if we're earning between 50,000 to 100,000 a month, what ideally should my lifestyle look like?
Okay, maybe just like I mentioned when I was starting this conversation, is your personal finance journey will always be very unique. So for me, I always try to avoid from generalizing people's, or maybe classifying people into a group, or maybe trying to have people think the same way. So if you look at maybe guys who try and follow, maybe use budgeting templates, maybe templates to track expenses, or maybe follow templates, investing templates. For me, I don't recommend those things because I always believe we have very different
Yes.
levels of personal finance, levels of expenses. We have very different financial goals. Our ages are different. Our income potentials are different. So maybe to explain that, I will give you just a simple example. So if you look at budgeting, for example, because I believe you had maybe a lot of earning classes that we're going to look
Yes,
at. Yeah.
yes,
So if
yes.
you look at a good example, just like budgeting, if you look at how the most recommended budgeting advice is using the 50, 30, 20 rule. I'm sure you have heard about that rule.
I have had many rules. I'm not entirely sure what the 50, 30, 20 did.
Yeah, so the 50, 30, 20 rule, what it says is that 50% should go to your essentials, so your housing, your food, your your clothing. Then 30% should go to your wants. So these are the things that are beyond your primary. These are your secondary needs
Yes,
now.
not basic needs.
Yeah, not basic needs. Then 20% should go to your savings. So that means that everyone, if you follow that rule, depending on your age, your financial goals, your level of income, your expenses, everything should be saving 20% of your income.
Yes.
But then I may be seated here and I want to retire in the next 5 years, and I want to save 95% of my income. So how will that maybe
The budgeting principle won't work with, yes.
It won't work for me.
Yes.
And then again, there are people who are very different. People have very different financial backgrounds. So maybe there's someone who maybe doesn't pay rent. Maybe he lives in his own house. He doesn't pay school fees. Maybe his kids are already done with school. Maybe his company fuels his car for him. Maybe he basically he almost has very little expenses. Maybe just food and just a few other expenses. So for that person, maybe that budgeting template doesn't work for him. Then you may have another person who maybe takes care of his parents, his household, maybe his family, his parents, his siblings, and even other friends, maybe other kids in their village or community or maybe something of the sort. He's maybe paying a mortgage. Maybe he's trying to run a business. So like I'm mentioning, people have very different and unique scenarios. So like I mentioned, there's a person maybe who wants to maybe achieve, who is crazy with financial independence, maybe the financial independence, retire early, the FIRE movement, he wants maybe to achieve financial independence in maybe the next 5-10 years. So for him telling that person to save 20% of the income doesn't make sense. Then the other day, there's maybe something that I've been sharing online on my spaces, whereby you have the 4 levels of budgeting. So the 4 levels of budgeting basically is just where you have level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4 of how people manage their personal finances. So level 1, we have this person, maybe he's maybe a low income earner, maybe someone who's just getting started with their career. So they spend 70% of their income maybe on essentials and 30% on now their wants. They save 0% of their income. So maybe they don't have a budget. They are living
month to month.
Yeah. Then level 2 now is where the 50, 30, 20 rule falls. So maybe 50% on essential, 30% on wants, 20% on savings. Then level 3 and level 4, these guys are saving. So level 3, you are saving 50% of your income, saving and investing 50% of your income. Level 4, you are saving, I think, 70% of your income. So now, depending with your income level, your age, your unique expenses, your financial background, your personal finance should be very unique to you. You should be having some set of rules that only you think they make sense. Because someone may come and ask you, you mean you save 95% of your income? Where
What's happening?
What's happening?
Okay.
That's someone may find that crazy.
Okay.
Someone else may come and ask you, yes, you earn a certain amount of money per month, which is considerably high, but then you only save 2% of that income. Does that even add up? So it should only make sense to you. That's number one. Then there's a very interesting quote, just to maybe top that off, from a book called I'll Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, whereby he talks about conscious spending, whereby he says that you should spend extravagantly on things that you love and cut costs mercilessly on things that you don't. So he gives an example whereby he says that his friend, who I think he calls Jim, got a better job and he got a pay raise. Now after that he moved into a smaller apartment, or a cheaper apartment. And when he asked him why he did that, he said that for him, he doesn't value where he lives, but he likes maybe going out camping and biking and doing all those kind of fun stuff. Those are the things that make
Him happy.
Make him happy. Those are the things that he loves. So for him, it made sense for him to cut the expenses on the housing expense and maybe allocate more finances to his fun activities, because that's what he loves. So for me, I've always said that your budget should always reflect the things that mean the most to you. So if you are a Christian, you'll have a certain percent of tithing.
Yes.
If you love giving charity or maybe giving back to the community, your budget should reflect that. If you're guys who like entertainment, sherehe, your budget will reflect that.
Yes.
If you're a guy who loves buying nice things, collectibles, your budget will reflect that. If you're guys, maybe you're a fashionista, you like dressing well, your budget will always reflect that. So your budget should always reflect things that you love, because money is a scarce resource and you should always allocate to the things that mean the most to you. So for me, that maybe it's a complicated way of looking at finances, but I try to make it simple as that. I don't try to say that maybe you should spend 20% on rent or 25% of your income on rent. So what if rent is my only expense in life? Maybe I have my own garden. Maybe I produce 70% of the food that I eat. Maybe my company fuels my car. Maybe my holidays are paid for. So if you're telling someone to only pay 25% of his income on rent, it may not make sense for him. And then if you're telling someone who is maybe has a lot of responsibilities and a lot of obligations that he's trying to settle with his finances, and tell them to account for 20% or 25% of his income on rent, then it might be too high for him.
Yeah.
So we cannot all fit in the same categorization of. So me, I always try to avoid that. So those budgeting templates, tracking income templates, that should live like this. Just have your money making the most sense of you. If someone tells you crazy, we are all crazy because we all have different things that we.
Do you think then sometimes it's that people struggle with the fact that they are not able to make people struggle with the fact that they don't make as much money as they would hope. And the reason I'm asking that is because I'm thinking about, like you're saying, you spend the different philosophies you've given, whether it is spend money on things that you love and don't spend on money, don't spend a lot of money on things that you don't love. And you gave the example of the book you were reading. So, and then you've given the example of, some people the expenses takes all the cash, So do you think that sometimes we create a culture where it's almost, I don't want to say shame, but it almost, like, if you're not investing or if you're not saving, like you're doing a wrong thing. So let's say you're making 1 million or even 2 million shillings a month, but then your expenses genuinely are at 2 million, a month. I don't know, based on whatever lifestyle you're choosing to live, your expenses are at 2 million a month. And so you're not able to invest or save or whatever. Are you then saying, by the way that you view things, then like you're fine?
Okay, that depends on a lot of things, like I mentioned. Okay, it depends on a lot of factors, because now that's just as a basic budgeting template that we're trying to look at. They're trying to tell us that the average person should save 20% of their income. But now, like I mentioned, people have very different backgrounds and expectations and goals. So now it depends with your scenario, because for most people who will be in that category, they will maybe have unnecessary expenses, or maybe expenses that you can avoid because of what maybe you call lifestyle creep. And because maybe if you are living at a lower income level, maybe you could still maybe make your budget, or maybe you could still afford the lifestyle that maybe a level of income could afford you. So I think for most people, when it comes to the higher levels of income, like the example that you have given, so for most cases, they will actually be doing a disservice to them, depending on the level of income. Because savings, like I always try and say that it becomes easier, or maybe at each level of income, savings has a different feel. because studies have shown that people who are in the high income levels, they tend to save higher percentages of their income than people who are in the lower in the lower brackets of the income level. So in the high income levels, because the example you have given can be termed maybe a high income level, now that for that person it depends with, is it a case of lifestyle creep? Is it a case of maybe helping people too much? Is it a case of maybe living a life beyond your means? Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe you have put my example out of context.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have deliberately put my example out of context. Yeah.
No, deliberately putting it out of context.
Yeah.
I was just looking at it from the perspective of, okay, there's no standardization of the budgeting. And so I'm just saying, I mean, I did pick like an extreme,
Yeah, that was
a very extreme example. But even if I was to say, okay, I'm more, someone who's making 150,000, right? But that's where my expenses are, whether it's coming down to rent, school fees, supporting family, but like my expenses are genuinely at 150, so I cannot invest. I don't have any other money to invest. I don't have any other money to save, and so I guess via what you were trying to say is like, yeah, I mean, you're living within your means as far as
Okay, what I'll say is, for someone like maybe who is in that extreme, for him saving will be hard. There may be someone who doesn't have those circumstances. Yeah. So for you, you'll have maybe to maybe, okay, I'm not sure how to put it across.
You have to make more money.
Okay, not make more money, but you'll have to work hard to save. For you, saving will be hard.
Yeah.
Because month on month already, you have already accounted for everything, maybe for 100% of your income. So now the question will be, if let's say you got a 20% pay cut, how will your life look like?
Yeah.
And if you got a 20% pay rise, how would your life look like?
Do you think there are a lot of people who come to terms with the fact that they may not be wealthy? Like, for example, and this I'm asking, I guess, also out of your experience, like with the different clients that you talk to and stuff. Do you think it's difficult for a human being to come to the terms with the fact that actually I will not be a wealthy person in this life? Like, based off of what I'm earning, based off of what I'm making, based off of my lifestyle, I'm not going to be wealthy and it's fine. Or I'm not going to have money and it's fine.
I think I read something close to that sometimes back, whereby this guy was trying to say that for young people, there's a stage that reaches whereby in your life and your career, as you progress, everyone when you are young and you're in school, you always have these dreams of maybe living in a certain place, leading some kind of lifestyle. Maybe if you are from a disadvantaged background, you have all these imaginations that you have of maybe all these goals and dreams that you have. But then, yes, when you are young, you are dreaming, or maybe you are making maybe you have some goals, or maybe you are dreaming, or maybe you have some projections in life. But then once you get into, you are through school, through college, then reality starts checking in now. And now it starts dawning to you, will I still be able to manage what I projected, maybe the financial goals that I had, maybe the life goals that I had? So there's usually that stage that reaches maybe late 20s, depending with your financial background and everything. So there's usually that stage that reaches, and there's that reality check, whereby now you start now asking yourself, yes, I had these goals and these aspirations when I was young, but now I'm an adult and things are maybe not adding up. So there are people who now, depending with where you are, first of all your age, then also your colleagues and maybe your peers, because people basically compare themselves with their peers. Because even your parents will start telling you, your classmate of this and this, so family is doing well, why are you still stuck behind? So people will compare you with their peers. So when those comparisons start coming in, and even you yourself, you are saying your classmates or maybe your peers in primary, maybe your high school campus, they are all well off. No, that's when it will start affecting you mentally. So there are people who actually hit that stage, and they tell themselves, maybe they try to convince themselves that maybe for myself I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's move to our next category. Kids, children, families, right? Do you think, again, numbers speaking, do you think kids are a good financial decision?
I don't want to answer that question.
No, in a vacuum. We're answering it. Everybody who's watching this or listening to this understands this conversation is in an absolute vacuum.
I don't want to answer that question. People will come for me.
No, but what are they? No, but what are they coming for? Like I've said, I've purely explained. This has nothing to do with emotional feeling, lineage. No, this is purely like the maths, the numbers of it.
Let me answer that question when I first have my first kid.
I mean,
When I have like 3 kids
then you can decide
then I
whether
can
there are
decide. Then
there are
I
good
can
financial
reflect
decision.
and see.
Yeah.
I can reflect and see that whether it's a good financial.
Do you know how much it costs to raise a kid in Kenya now? Do you have an average?
Okay, I'm not sure because it depends with their upbringing. But you can always count backwards from yourself. Because you have seen what it has maybe
Yeah.
cost to bring you up. So you
Yeah.
can always do the backwards projections.
Yeah.
But I think it depends with the upbringing and the kind of education first that your parents gave you, and then also the kind of lifestyle that your parents gave you when
Yeah.
you're growing up. So it depends on all those factors.
Okay. Since you don't want to answer whether kids are a good financial decision, let's talk about preparation for kids. Financially speaking, what do you think is, I guess, a financially correct way for preparing for kids?
Okay, so let me just try and I'll try and start this off by comparing the options that we have. So whenever people are talking about preparing for kids, what most people think about is preparing for their kids' education.
Yes.
So yeah, whether it's high school or secondary school and campus or university. So that's what most people are thinking about. Maybe just catering for your kids' education. So if you look at the options that we have in the Kenyan market right now, we have the main sold product. It's what we call education policies or education insurance policies, which maybe people have already people who maybe know me from my online spaces. I've always tried to argue that yes, the product tries to achieve what it was set up for, but I believe it does a disservice to, because if you look at the maths behind it and you analyze the product entirely, you'll see a lot of things that don't really add up, and that doesn't really make sense. So number one is that these policies, they try to combine what we call wealth protection and wealth creation. So because I believe if you are trying to save up for your kids' education, you want your money to grow at a decent rate, because just like an investment that you're making. So one, you want to prioritize the safety of your money, so you don't want to lose your money. Then number two, you want your money to grow at a decent rate, that maybe it's beating the inflation rate. So that's number one. So it combines wealth creation and wealth protection. So wealth creation, in that you are trying to save up a certain amount of money month on month or maybe year on year. Then the next 10 years you'll have a good amount of money. Maybe you'll have a resource, a pool of funds that you can use maybe to cater for your kids' expenses without necessarily having to maybe rely on your monthly income. So that's number one. So then if you look at these policies, how they're structured, number one, if you look at what you will have contributed for the 10 years and what they will be giving at the end of the 10 years, it's almost the same, or maybe the return rate, it's, let's say, about 5% or even less than 5%, or depending on the company that is issuing this product. And then again, they have structured in a life aspect. So it also has some wealth protection aspect in terms of it, in terms of it has a life insurance on top of it. So if you look at if you look at the life insurance element as well, the sum assured that you're getting from this product, it's also quite low, because if you look at the chance, because parents try to think that, okay, maybe if I don't make it, maybe
Something
if I die,
happened.
something happened, I will still want my kids to see themselves through school. So that's why they take the policy, because maybe it has the savings element and the insurance aspect of it. But if you look at one, the savings element, poor. Then number two, the insurance aspect of it, it's also poor. And remember, you can only get one of the benefits. You can't get both, because it's either you are alive
Oh, you
at the end of the term,
and you get the
you get the maturity value, or if something happened along the way, maybe
They
after
get
the
there.
first year, then the sum assured is paid. So if you look at that combination of that policy, for me the numbers don't make sense. So for me, it always makes sense for me to split the two. So if you can take a standalone, whether it's term life or whole life, depending. Okay, so whole life is usually more expensive than term life, but it serves its purpose, because it will cover you for whole of life until death. So if you're still alive when your kids are done with school, it still covers you and your family and your beneficiaries until that time when maybe you'll die, and it has a guaranteed death benefit, because I believe everyone will die. Then term life, so though whole life is usually more expensive than term life, so if you only want to cover that expense, or maybe that extreme possibility that maybe you may not be there when your kids are getting to that schooling age, maybe that level that you want, so you may take a term life. It's much cheaper, and maybe it has a better cover than that. Then you can always, if you want, now you are saving for your kids' education, you can look at maybe which financial asset that can give you maybe it's so one, it has safety of your money, and then number two, it gives you a decent interest rate. Because because here you are dealing with two things. If you look at what the the cost of maybe food and everything right now, just the inflation rate, that means the cost of education, maybe the cost of living will have gone up if you are saving up for the next 10 years. So school fees will have gone up, and also the basic living will have gone up. So you want your money to keep up with that inflation rate,
Yes.
or maybe that inflation level. And then at the end of the day, you also want some return, because you are foregoing using that money today or eating that money today,
Yes.
so that you can derive some utility from it in the future. So you want to be rewarded for that, because like I've always said, saving is very hard, delaying gratification is very hard. You could be using that money to buy a bigger car, live in a nice place, or maybe even be going out, maybe for travel. So saving money is very hard. You want to be rewarded for that delayed gratification. So you want also a premium interest on top of the inflation rate. So going by that, you can always find good products, or maybe good investment products that you can always put your money into, that can give you maybe a better return than maybe what these other policies can give you. So that combination of maybe a term life or a whole life and maybe an investment product can always be a better thing for you than maybe education policies, because of the things that I've given you as well. Then as well, another thing that maybe these policies fail to achieve is, if let's say you want to take your to maybe you're well off, you want to maybe to to sponsor your kids to maybe study abroad. So you have seen obviously you have the history of how the Kenyan shilling has performed against the USD. So if you are saving for that now, these education policies don't account for that now. So because now if you look at how the Kenyan shilling performs against the USD, year on average times we lose around maybe 1 to 4% per annum. But then the last 2 years have been abnormal, because last year we saw maybe a 24% depreciation. This year we have seen the shilling bouncing back. So then again, it doesn't account for that, because if you look at the last 10 years, the price of maybe what $1, how many shillings $1 was giving you, let's say 10 years, it was probably, I'm not sure of the number, but maybe it was probably less than 100, the exchange rate.
Yeah,
Now we are at 129. So maybe in the next 10 years, it'll be at 150. So if you have those special arrangements for yourself, then it doesn't account for that. So for me, I've been trying to push industry players in the market to give us a better product for guys to save for their kids' education. Because for me, I believe the ones that we have currently done, that just doesn't make sense.
Don't do it justice, huh?
Yeah, so it's a space that if there are fund managers who are listening to this, these are places that they can explore, because I believe saving for your kids' education, it's a general goal that each and every parent will be motivated to save for. But then if you are not giving us a good product that you can save up for our kids' education, then it doesn't make sense, because at the end of the day, you are not helping us achieve
Our goal
to the best that we can, because I believe there's a lot that industry players can do and come up with a better product that can help us achieve that goal.
Okay.
So coming up with new products is always an issue as well, because I've talked with some guys in the industry. They're saying that maybe Capital Markets Authority, regulating these products, and maybe authorizing these products, it's always a process, and maybe there may be some politics in the industry
in the process.
So it can be a bit challenging.
Okay. Final question, or final thing I just want us to quickly discuss. And I know you've talked about how customizable and how personal financial planning and finances are for people, and it depends on what people want to do, etc. But my question for you is, what shouldn't Kenyan who's looking to invest and make money, what shouldn't they have? What should they not miss in their portfolio?
Okay, so maybe I can just start with the basics of investment. So whenever we're talking about investment products, we have something we call an investor profile. So an investor profile basically is just a background check of your finances, or maybe of your financial situation. The same way when you walk into a doctor's room, they will ask you, okay, what's your weight, what's your height,
blood pressure, things,
what's your all those measurements, or maybe they'll do a body examination, or maybe a health examination of your current health levels, and then now they will use that as the background to advise for any medical checks, or maybe any diagnosis, or maybe any prescriptions that they'll do. So in the same case for everyone, they should maybe, if you look at any investment company, the first thing that they try to do before they give any investment recommendations is just have an understanding of your investor profile. So how old are you? What are your financial goals? Or maybe what are you trying to achieve? What are your cash needs, or maybe your liquidity needs in the next few years to come? Do you anticipate to maybe your income to increase or maybe to decrease? Do you have any other investments so far? yeah, all those things. What's your risk appetite? What's your ability and willingness to take risk? So there are all those things that come into play for you to know what investment products will work for you and what investment products will not work for you. So you have first to understand that, because like I mentioned, one investment can be a good investment for me, and then another investment can be bad for you. And then the other day the other day in the previous podcast, I think there's a time you asked me the most asked question that I usually get.
Yes.
And then that's almost what you're asking me it's just like a similar question to that,
Yes.
because everyone is asking me, I have a certain amount of money, I have an X amount of money, where can I best invest it? Then I usually tell them, okay, I can't really answer that because I don't know your investor profile. I don't understand your risk appetite, your financial goals. Do you have any other assets? What do you already have in your portfolio? So answering that question can be quite hard, but maybe just to give some background guidance. So number one is that you try to have some level of financial literacy. So how well you understand money and financial markets, the better, because you have a lot of options that you can always consider when investing. Because like I gave the quote last time, to the man with the hammer, every problem is a nail. Yeah. So if you have a lot of you have a lot of assets that you can consider, you can choose. You have a variety, because if you are serving food and you have a lot of things on the menu to choose from, you can always make a good decision of what you want to eat at that particular moment. So work on your financial literacy, understand investments and what options that are there in the market. If you can't do that, then you can always find financial advisors who maybe you can trust, or maybe who you think can do a good work for you, if maybe you are a professional who is busy and you don't want to focus your time on that. But I believe everyone should have a basic level of financial literacy, because yes, maybe even if you came to me and maybe I started advising you on your money, maybe I can recommend you to invest in crypto, Bitcoin, and you don't understand that. So for you, maybe you'll be entrusting me with your millions or maybe your billions, but then you are not even aware of where I'm investing your money. It's always good to have that level of financial literacy. Then after that, I think you'll be able to make a lot of financial decisions after if you understand the options that you have. Then if you can't do it, you can always outsource that. You can always look for a financial advisor, and you can always come into terms with the best investments that you can always make. Yeah. So for me, I'll just say a lot want to say that there are certain asset classes that you can miss, or that you should have, or that you shouldn't have, but just understand financial markets, understand your personal perspective, or maybe your personal finance side of the story as well, and then just be financially literate. So I always say that there's this story, or maybe this analogy that's usually given. We spend 20 years of our life learning how to maybe demand a higher income, but then we never learn how to invest, or maybe how to manage that income, which is quite
problematic to say the least.
Yeah. So
Okay.
work on your financial literacy levels. Always for me, I always say that there are two things that everyone should be worried about, or maybe concerned about. One is health and money, because that, regardless of who you are or where you are, they will always affect you. So how can you stay healthy? How can you maybe reduce those bad conditions that maybe you don't want to affect you? So you should always be checking on your health and learning more about how you can live a better, healthier life. And then you should always be learning about money, because everyone is affected by money. We are making money, we want to make the most out of money. So in as much as you can, if there are two areas that you must focus on in life, it's health and money. So there's no shortcut about that, because you'll always be shortchanged somewhere. Yeah, because even in the health industry, I've seen what Big Pharma is doing. There's all this, some people call them controversies, so I don't want to delve in that. But health and finances, those are two areas that you always keep in check. You can't outsource your health to someone else. Yes, you can, but remember, you don't want to be shortchanged by anyone. You just want to be the one who is comfortable making the decisions. So even if you're advised, you are being advised from a point of knowledge. Maybe that person just confirming, or maybe helping you to evaluate the decision that you have made. So that will be my
your answer.
My advice to that.
Okay, Sawa. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks for this session. I think this was the first of a kind that we've had where there's actual finance opinions or commentary that's been given. I think it was really good. I definitely learned a thing or two, especially about the renting versus buying. Definitely a conversation to be had there, and some priorities to be looked at. But I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for coming. And for everyone else on our audience, please let us know whatever other questions you have that I did not ask, that I did not answer. Please put them in the comments. We will make sure that they're answered. And we will see you guys next Friday on the next episode.